911, what is your emergency?
My sister! An alligator! It's got her! Oh God, please help.
Sir, where are you?
We're in Juniper Springs. Near the park. It came out of nowhere. I can't.
We're sending help now.
Every year, millions of people flock to Florida. They come for the sun, the sand, the theme parks, the promise of a perfect, sun-soaked escape. They chase that feeling of freedom, of leaving the real world behind. And for most, that's exactly what they find. They dip their toes in the ocean. They swim in crystal-clear springs. They feel the warmth on their skin. But what they often forget is that beneath that beautiful, shimmering surface, a different world exists. A world of ancient predators, of silent hunters that have ruled these waters for millions of years. This is the story of Annemarie Campbell, a young woman who went looking for paradise and instead found herself in the terrifying, unforgiving jaws of a nightmare. A nightmare that would remind everyone that in Florida, the line between a serene swim and a fight for your life is thinner than you could ever imagine. Annemarie Campbell was a dreamer, a free spirit in a world that often felt too small. At just 23 years old, she had that kind of infectious energy that lit up every room she entered. Originally from the quiet, rolling hills of Tennessee, she was a true country girl at heart, but with a deep-seated longing for adventure. She was a gifted graphic designer, a creative mind who saw the world in vivid colors and endless possibilities. Her work was more than a job. It was an extension of her soul, a way to share the beauty she saw with everyone else. But her real passion wasn't behind a screen. It was outdoors. She loved to hike, to camp, to get lost in nature's quiet embrace. This trip to Florida wasn't just a vacation, it was a pilgrimage. She had planned it for months, a chance to trade the familiar green of Tennessee for the unique wild landscape of Florida. Her brother Chris and his girlfriend Jessica were with her. They were a tight-knit trio, always pushing each other to explore, to live life to the fullest. For them, this was the ultimate escape, a chance to reconnect and make memories that would last a lifetime. Little did they know, those memories would be stained with blood. They arrived in Ocala National Forest with high spirits. The air was thick with the scent of pine and humid earth. Juniper Wayside Park was their destination, a place famous for its crystal-clear springs and winding, calm waterways. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, with sunlight dappling through the cypress trees and the water so clear you could see every ripple of sand on the bottom. To Annemarie, it was a paradise, the kind of place she had always dreamed of, a place where she could feel truly at peace. She'd spent her life cherishing nature, believing in its beauty and its gentle power. She saw no threat here, only serenity. But the truth is, the most dangerous places can sometimes be the most beautiful. And this idyllic spring was hiding a secret. A silent, scaly secret waiting just beneath the surface. Annemarie's life was defined by this connection to nature. She wasn't reckless. She was just at home in the wild. She had a gentle confidence, an unshakable belief that if you respected the land, it would respect you back. This wasn't a girl looking for a thrill. This was a girl looking for a moment of quiet awe, a moment to simply exist in a place of pure, untouched beauty. She was an experienced swimmer and knew her way around a kayak and a hiking trail. She felt safe, secure, almost spiritually connected to her surroundings. She was the kind of person who would stop to look at a small wildflower or to watch a turtle cross the road. She was a steward of the environment in her own small way. But sometimes a deep respect for nature isn't enough to protect you from its raw, brutal force. Sometimes, an animal's instinct to hunt is stronger than a human's desire for peace. The days leading up to the incident were perfect. They had kayaked down the winding Juniper Creek, spotting turtles sunning themselves on logs and hearing the calls of unseen birds. They'd swum in the main spring, feeling the cold, fresh water invigorate their bodies. The atmosphere was light, full of laughter and the simple joy of being together. Chris and Jessica watched Annemarie, smiling as she dove and surfaced, her excitement palpable. She was completely in her element. She had a snorkel and mask, eager to see the world beneath the water's surface. a world that was just as vibrant and alive as the one above it. She thought she was seeing a side of Florida that most tourists never get to experience. She thought she was a guest in this ecosystem. But to the one creature lurking in the shadows, she wasn't a guest at all. She was just another meal. This was Annemarie Campbell's last great adventure. It wasn't about seeking danger, it was about seeking life. She was a young woman on the cusp of her future, with so much to give, so many designs to create, so many trails to hike. Her life was a canvas, and she was painting it with bold, beautiful strokes. But on this sunny afternoon in May, an ancient predator, a creature with a canvas of its own, was about to paint its final, terrifying stroke. A stroke that would turn a peaceful spring into a scene of unspeakable horror. And the world would watch, horrified, as a young woman's dream turned into a savage tragedy. The animal that ended Annemarie's life was a giant of its kind, an American alligator, or Alligator mississippiensis. This one, however, was no ordinary specimen. It was estimated to be over 11 feet long, a hulking mass of muscle, scales, and ancient instinct. These creatures are living fossils, their lineage tracing back millions of years. They are ambush predators, built for silent, lethal surprise. Their bodies are streamlined, their hides armored, their jaws a crushing vice. With over 80 razor-sharp teeth, they can exert a bite force of over 2,000 pounds per square inch, the strongest bite of any living animal. They don't chew their prey, they hold it, shake it violently, and then drown it. This particular alligator, according to later reports, was a large, dominant male. Alligators are naturally reclusive, but they are also highly territorial, especially males of this size. Their behavior is ruled by pure instinct: eat, reproduce, and survive. In the wild, they typically avoid humans, but that avoidance can break down, especially when they've become habituated to people, or when food sources are scarce. The springhead where Annemarie was snorkeling was a perfect hunting ground. The water was clear, yes, but it was also a prime ambush location, with plenty of places for a large predator to hide in plain sight. It wasn't about the gator being bad or evil. It was simply an animal, doing what millions of years of evolution had taught it to do. It was a perfect killing machine, and Annemarie Campbell had unknowingly entered its domain. The alligator's senses are finely tuned for hunting. It can detect the slightest change in water pressure from a distant splash. It can see clearly underwater, its eyes designed for both the depths and the surface. Its silent, almost invisible approach is its most dangerous weapon. There are no warning signs, no roaring, no charging. 1 second, the water is calm. The next, it erupts in a storm of teeth and fury. This alligator wasn't hungry in the way a human is hungry. It was driven by a deep biological imperative, an ancient hunger that had to be satisfied. And as Annemarie floated peacefully, her back to the shadows, the predator was already on the move. Slowly, silently, its powerful tail propelling it forward, its eyes locked on its unsuspecting target. It was the perfect stalk, and it was about to end in a perfect, horrifying ambush. The warnings were there, if anyone had known how to read them. Florida's alligator population had been steadily growing for years, a testament to successful conservation efforts. But with more gators came more encounters. In the spring of 2006, the state was particularly on edge. There had been reports of unusually aggressive behavior, of gators venturing into residential areas and public parks. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, had already issued warnings, telling residents and tourists to be extra cautious. But these warnings were often broad, general statements. They didn't feel real. They didn't feel personal. The week before Annemarie's death, there had been 2 other fatal alligator attacks in Florida. Just a few days earlier, a 28-year-old woman was killed near Fort Lauderdale, and a day after that, a 43-year-old man was killed near Miami. 3 deaths in 1 week. It was unprecedented. A tragic, almost surreal series of events that shocked the state and made international headlines. The local news was filled with stories of gator sightings and close calls. People were starting to wonder if something had changed, if the gators were getting bolder, if the balance between human and animal had been fatally tipped. But for Annemarie and her family, far from the urban chaos, the spring felt safe, remote, untouched. There were no signs warning them of an active threat. There were no rangers patrolling the area, no armed guards standing watch. It was a place where people came to get away from a world of fear, not to face it head-on. The water was so clear, so inviting. It seemed impossible that a predator of that size could be lurking unseen. They believed they were in a place of natural harmony. They believed they were safe, and that belief, that simple human trust, would prove to be the most tragic mistake of all. May 14th, 2006. A Sunday. The sun was high, and the air was warm and heavy. Annemarie, Chris, and Jessica had spent the morning hiking, enjoying the quiet trails. Around midday, they decided to cool off in the spring. They walked to the springhead, a beautiful circular pool where the water bubbled up from the earth, crystal clear and inviting. Annemarie was excited. She pulled on her snorkel and mask, eager to get a closer look at the underwater world. Chris and Jessica stood on the bank, watching her, laughing and talking as she pushed off into the water. The minutes ticked by. Annemarie floated peacefully, her back to the shore, lost in the silent beauty beneath the surface. To her, the world was just the gentle swaying of aquatic plants, the darting of small fish, the soft murmur of the water. She was in a world of her own, but just behind her, in the deeper, darker parts of the pool, a massive silent shadow was moving. Its ancient, unblinking eyes were fixed on her. The ambush was perfectly timed, perfectly executed. Suddenly, a massive shape erupted from the water. There was a violent, thrashing splash, and then a blood-curdling scream, a sound that was pure visceral terror. Chris and Jessica turned just in time to see the unthinkable. An enormous alligator had Annemarie in its jaws. Her body was contorted, her limbs flailing, and her head was locked in the animal's powerful bite. They were frozen for a split second, their minds struggling to process the impossible horror unfolding before their eyes. Then, instinct took over. They didn't hesitate. Chris and another family member, a male cousin, jumped into the water. The chaos was absolute. The water churned a dark red. They were splashing, yelling, screaming. They didn't have weapons, just their hands and a desperate, animalistic will to save their loved one. They punched the gator. They poked it in the eyes. They tried to pry its jaws open. It was a primal, savage fight, man against beast, and the beast was winning. The gator, sensing a struggle, began its terrifying death roll, a violent, spinning motion designed to tear its prey apart. Annemarie's body was twisted and thrashed in the churning water. The men continued their desperate attack, and finally, miraculously, the gator's hold broke. The men pulled Annemarie's limp body free. She was unresponsive, her injuries catastrophic. They dragged her to the shore, her body a testament to the brutal force she had endured. The men were in shock, their hands and faces covered in her blood. The quiet, idyllic spring was now a crime scene, a place of unspeakable grief. All around them, the world continued on, the birds still chirping, the sun still shining. But for them, the world had ended. The 911 call was frantic, choked with panic and disbelief. The dispatcher, used to the routine of everyday emergencies, listened to the terrified pleas, her voice a stark contrast of practiced calm. Within minutes, the first responders were on their way. Sheriff's deputies arrived first, their faces grim as they took in the scene. The sight of Annemarie's lifeless body, the blood-soaked men, the stillness of the spring that had so recently been a scene of violence. It was a nightmare made real. Medics followed, but their work was a formality. There was nothing they could do. Annemarie Campbell was gone. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, was called in immediately. Their job was to investigate the attack and, if possible, to find and remove the offending alligator. This was a tragedy, but it was also a public safety crisis. 3 deaths in 1 week was a clear sign that something was wrong. The FWC officers were professionals, hardened by years of dealing with Florida's wildest creatures. But even they were shaken by the scene. They set traps, baited with meat in the spring and surrounding waterways. They knew they were hunting an intelligent, powerful animal. It wouldn't be easy. Eyewitness accounts from Chris and Jessica were crucial. They described the gator's size, its movements, and the specific injuries they inflicted on it during the struggle. They remembered poking it in the eyes, a desperate act that now provided a vital clue. FWC officers were on high alert. The manhunt for the killer gator was on. For days, the quiet area was swarming with officials, their boats moving silently through the water, their eyes scanning for any sign of the predator. The media descended, their cameras flashing, their reporters asking the same questions over and over again. Why? How? And would it happen again? The news of Annemarie Campbell's death, coming so soon after the others, sent a ripple of fear through the state. The media coverage was intense. National news outlets picked up the story, showcasing Florida not as a paradise, but as a place of danger. The narrative was simple and terrifying. The gators were winning. Protests erupted in some parts of the state, with people demanding a larger cull of the alligator population. The FWC, however, insisted that the incidents were isolated, a tragic coincidence rather than a sign of a larger systemic problem. They pointed to the fact that Annemarie was in a remote natural area and that the gators involved were of an unusually large size. Still, the public was scared. And for Annemarie's family, the public debate was just noise. They were consumed by a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. An autopsy was performed on Annemarie's body. The results were heartbreakingly clinical, a brutal confirmation of the family's eyewitness account. She had died from drowning and a horrific series of injuries. Severe blunt force trauma to her head and torso, multiple rib fractures, and deep lacerations. The medical examiner confirmed that her death was swift, a small comfort in the face of such a brutal end. The gator's powerful bite had been instantly lethal. Days later, the FWC caught an alligator in the spring. It was over 11 feet long, exactly as described. And when they examined it, they found the 2 eye injuries, a perfect match for the desperate strikes of Annemarie's family. The gator was euthanized, and its stomach contents were examined. While no human remains were found, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. This was the animal, the killer. Its reign of terror was over. But for the Campbell family, there was no closure. The animal was gone, but Annemarie was not coming back. The tragedy forced a public conversation about Florida's fragile ecosystem and the delicate balance between man and nature. The FWC began to issue more targeted, aggressive warnings. They increased patrols in high-traffic areas. The incident became a cautionary tale, a brutal lesson for anyone who thought Florida's natural waterways were just giant swimming pools. It was a reminder that you were a visitor in a wild world, and that world had its own rules, rules that could be broken in a split second, with fatal consequences. Annemarie Campbell went looking for a moment of peace, a quiet communion with nature. She found it for a time in a beautiful, untouched spring. But in that moment of peace, she also found the brutal, unforgiving reality of a world that doesn't care about our intentions, our dreams, or our love for the wild. It was a stark reminder that even in the most beautiful places, there are shadows. Silent, ancient shadows with unblinking eyes and a hunger that can never be tamed. And that no matter how much we love and respect nature, sometimes nature doesn't love us back. It simply sees a world of prey and a hunger that must be fed. Annemarie's story is a terrifying echo, a voice from the depths of a pristine spring, reminding us all that in Florida's watery world you're never truly alone. And what's watching you might not be friendly at all. It might be waiting, watching. And its silence might be the last thing you ever hear. The sun still shines on Juniper Springs. The water still flows, clear and cool. The birds still sing. But for those who know the story, the beauty is a little less comforting. It's a little more chilling. And the stillness of the water seems to hide not just the secrets of the earth, but the memory of a scream that was swallowed whole by the silent ancient world below.